It's like July, August, September, like some of those brutal times a year, and that's when your highest volume is. So highest stress, highest need for recovery, highest need for nutrients, highest need for fluid. You don't want to be cutting calories then either, because all the extra volume you're doing, all the extra intensity you're doing is going to be negated or even worse. And you see this with so many people. Like the reason you feel sluggish and tired is oftentimes not because you're training too much, it's because you're not fueling well.
And we're rolling. Welcome
to
our podcast.
Man, happy Monday today. If you're listening in real time, and if you're just catching up, it's January 20th, 2020, and this is episode 340. 340th episode of the Crushing Iron Podcast. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm snowed in here in Nashville.
You got snow?
It is flaking out there. I don't know the town is going.
I was gonna say, I was like,
I looked out and I'm like, that looks like snow. And then I thought, well, there goes today for 90% of this town.
90% of Nashville. I was like, yeah, you said snowed in. I was like, man, I haven't heard anything about like snow. We got nothing here. Obviously, Chattanooga gets different weather, but we're not that far away. But
no.
Yes, you know that in the South, if you get, because it's funny because we see you and I, like we both and work with a lot of athletes that are in like Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Northeast, like all over, and like parts of the country that like get legit snow. I mean, you know this from growing up in Wisconsin. You know what legit snow is like, and they'll like post pictures of like running like 10 miles on their yak tracks and like 4-degree temps and getting out doing this and plowing the streets and still doing work and getting out or maybe doing like cross country skiing. And then you see like 9 snowflakes fall upon someone's hood of the car, and all of a sudden social media is abuzz. The news stations are out, with like fake fans blowing it like there's like a tsunami coming in, and you're like, dude, it's like forecasted for 10% snow today, and schools are canceled at 10. They're letting out early. It's chaos. Milk and eggs are gone, and it never happens. But that's the South, and that's where we live, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, but let me just tell you, that is spilling into the north, too, because I've been home, obviously, a few times lately, and they're starting to cancel stuff on the threat, too. And I think it's all the news. And speaking of news, they're probably going crazy today with the snow and the Titans losing down here and all kinds of stuff. They got a lot on their plate. But, yeah, up north, man, I forgot what it was exactly. I was getting together with one of my buddies one night, and I was like, what do you got? What time's school? He goes, school's already canceled. They're it's supposed to snow tomorrow. I was like,
weak sauce, dude.
Yeah. So they got it going. It may not be way up into Minnesota or Wisconsin yet, but it's certainly in the southern part.
It's definitely not in Minnesota. They don't even care. They're like, 12 inches, big deal. We'll just, matter of fact, let's go to school early today. That's kind
of. Dude, I lived in Minneapolis. It's true, man. I lived in Minneapolis, and everybody up there has like a Subaru or
oh, for sure,
road race, some kind of like really solid 4-wheel drive thing. They do not even flinch. I think I was driving to work. I mean, like a dozen times or more in blizzards.
Yeah, no care.
Big deal.
They don't even care. So, hey, here's to you. We're saluting the state of Minnesota today and your toughness and your resiliency in all forms of winter weather. Here's to you. And, hey, here's to you as well. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. Again, this is the Crushing Iron Podcast, where we talk about it all. Obviously, we talk about winter weather in the South. We talk about football. But most importantly, we talk about triathlon, training, racing, how it complements, intersects with your life, how they balance and sometimes counteract each other. And Mike and I do our best. I'm Coach Robbie. That's Mike. And we do our best to have an open format, conversational style, no sponsors, no ads, and share our experiences both personally and then also with the athletes we work with. Sometimes even we'll share stories from people who have commented or had questions or posts in our closed Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group, which is now, I think, inching towards like 2,500 people in there. It's a really awesome group with great people. And speaking of inching closer to big numbers, we are inching ever so closely to 1 million downloads. And listen, we've done a lot of things in this podcast. Obviously, we're not there yet, and we could, have a screeching halt and people hate us tomorrow. But we'll inevitably get there here in the next probably couple weeks. And I've
Not
been
a couple of weeks, dude.
I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic here.
I mean, because it's taken a way longer time than I thought.
Oh,
We're
for
moving
sure.
along.
It's like, hey, but it all happens in due time. So we appreciate you listening, and if you can take anything from this podcast and apply it to your own life, again, like we do our best, even though we probably don't do a great job of it, to deliver the information and the content that we talk about, and we kind of sift through and put it out there in a digestible way that doesn't feel like we're force feeding it down your throat. I mean, sometimes I think, especially with me, not Mike, I might get a little amped up on a few things that I think are really important, but I do it because I care and because I want you to have a healthy and happy lifestyle and a sustainable future in what is a wonderful sport of triathlon, or any endurance sport for that matter. So yeah, that's what we'll do today. And again, we know there's a lot of choices out there, so we appreciate you giving us your time, and we'll dive back in here in just a moment.
Well, we're dived in right now.
I mean, we're like knee deep. I mean,
we warm up. I mean, as you always say, it's like I always analogize with
analogize.
Warm up into your event, man.
Is that is analogize even a word?
I don't know, probably not, but
I like it. No. Like, I analogized the other day. This really great. I'm all about analogies. I had a decent one, I thought, in our close Facebook group. But before we go into any number of topics that I kind of had for today, it was a big sporting weekend, and that usually spurs on a few topics for you. And so I wanted to give you the floor in case you had a specific direction or just a couple thoughts before we dove into the meat of the podcast.
McGregor's back.
Oh God, that guy's. I'm gonna spare the words I want to choose for that guy, but yeah, he won in I think I saw 40 seconds. But I in general have a just general distaste for that guy.
Yeah.
I can't think of a more obnoxious individual. Anyway, I'm sure sorry for all the Irish listeners we have, all -5 of you now.
He performs under the limelight, though. I got to give him that, man.
Yeah, well, it's not always what you do in the limelight; it's how you live your daily life too.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, all those. I mean,
not maybe. It's
all these people,
true.
though, man. Come on.
It's what?
All these people are just looking for attention first, and then showing up to the game second. It seems like.
I mean, I wouldn't say everybody.
Not everybody, but it's a lot of people, I
hope he's grown up a little bit. Maybe he can stay out of trouble for more than 3 days.
Well, there's one thing I keep reading about that guy, though. It's when the lights go on, he is just dialed in, historically. The bigger the event, the more dialed. So I think there's something to be learned there, about racing. But other than that.
I did read that he had some sort of I don't want to call it an awakening because I think that's too large of a word, but he had some kind of he reconciled where he was looking at how basically he took what LeBron James, obviously what he can spend is totally different from what you and I can spend over the course of a year on his health and his fitness and wellness and recovery and meals and stuff, and it was 1.5 million was what he spent last year in nutrition and recovery and all the things he needed to kind of keep his body in tip-top shape. Obviously, he's quite a bit older, I think, than McGregor. And then McGregor was I spent $0 on on any of those things. I was spending them on cars and Rolexes and all these kind of things. And then I guess since he's been, I think probably a fairly lengthy layoff from what I had read, he went in reverse and started spending money on those kind of things. And maybe that's why he performed so well, all for the gigantic endurance event of 40 seconds. Yeah, I know. Anyway, but was that what you were talking about today, McGregor, or did you have something of substance we could talk about today?
No, I don't have anything of substance. I mean, the NFL, it always kind of sucks me in a little bit at this time of the year, but I normally don't really care too much about it.
It sucked you in big time.
That's all a ruse, man. With you, I just kind of pimp it out there.
Oh yeah, appreciate it. Well, if you start texting me about NBA games, then I'll know that things are kind of going awry. But I thought I had a couple topics today, and I'm gonna let you pick. I usually throw a few out there and I'll let you pick. My my first one was to kind of reiterate and go back to the kind of the analogizing that I did this last week and in our closed Facebook group when I gave the cooking in the oven analogy, talking about basically what I was summarizing was, this time of year, you're starting to put in a lot of work. I mean, I know a lot of athletes start to really dial in or quote unquote focus in January, but a lot of people have been working all the way through. Like, we have a lot of athletes that work basically year round. The intensity and the duration and volume of the weeks obviously change, but the focus is always there. And then you've got a lot of people are having marathons, half marathons, and then, I mean, I think we even have an athlete in February, March in Puerto Rico. So like the season is basically here. Like as you're getting closer, and you always see athletes like when they start to gain a lot of fitness a couple weeks out from their event, they will like go too hard or go too long in a workout just to prove themselves or to prove that they can do it or to see what they have. And oftentimes that messes up their training and can oftentimes mess up their race. And just in terms of, going too hard in your training, and like basically what I'm saying is like the need to prove yourself in practice can ruin a lot of things you want to do on race day. So I want to talk about that, or we can't talk about that. I wanted to talk about trying to predict your future in terms of athletes who like to predict everything they can do in their training and how that kind of motivation and perfectionism can lead to burnout. And then the third one that I want to talk about, which is something that we have, I think, rarely ever talked about because it is an incredibly sensitive subject, but we oftentimes don't shy away from those. Because I feel like we're open and honest stuff, and people who have listened to us for a long period of time know the place that we come from, and we don't talk as or try to come across as experts, but just people who are experienced and share those. But I also thought today we could talk about weight and its place in endurance sports and healthy ways to approach that, things you need to be aware of, things that society tries to push on you, and things you need to likely take into consideration of yourself if you're going through trying to make changes in your weight or your body composition, or you're trying to add weight. All these things are, again, it's a very sensitive topic because it seems like diet, religion, and politics are the three like most polarizing things you can ever bring up. And people just can't wait to get offended by whatever you say and say that you're totally right and totally wrong. But I also don't think that's a reason for us to shy away and not talk through it, because I think it's something that everyone goes through in life, the good and the bad. I've gone through it, and so I thought that would also be a topic we could go through today. So depending on your courage and your thickness of skin, we can go through one of those three today.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, dude. I think I'm up for the weight one. I don't
weight one.
Yeah, I mean, like, because I do think it's important. I don't necessarily have answers per se a lot of times, I feel like, but I do know that, like, while I wouldn't consider myself to have really had a weight problem, I understand like how that can affect you and your image and like how it can get in your head and stuff like that. So I mean, I will certainly definitely go into it because I'm very interested in it, because I was watching something the other day or last night, I think it was, that they talked about how it's an interesting time, obviously, and there's a lot of people that get very alarmed by it, and it's kind of been ignited in a lot of ways by our lifestyle, I think, a lot of in this country specifically. And back in the day, it was kind of, people were celebrated more for losing weight now, and I think a lot of times it's I don't know, the balance of it's kind of interesting. So if you want to kick it off, I'm certainly willing to discuss it, because I definitely feel it, man. I mean, I think
it's
a health issue.
It is, and so that's why I want to address it. And again, like Mike and I are both gonna. If you've listened to this podcast, this for fact. And if you haven't, you probably already come to this conclusion. But neither Mike and I are sports dietitians or nutritionists, or do we consider ourselves experts in any field, much less the diet, nutritional area of training and basically life. I mean, we've talked about this, in our podcast before. I know a lot. I know a good amount of what it takes to be successful in endurance sports. I know what you probably should take in terms of, hourly calories and the events you're doing. But if you want something specific and you want something from a professional, then we send you over to the people that we work with, and we always send people to, which is the Core Diet, and they do race plans and fuel planning, all that kind of stuff. So I just want to get that across kind of out in the beginning, is that, that's, we're not experts, and I think so. My thing about weight and why I think it's an important discussion is because the obsession that we now have as a society, and then endurance athletes especially, like when I first started coaching endurance athletes over 10 years ago, one of the first things I noticed was, and this isn't true with all people, but I always equated people with being skinny, quote unquote, or being thin, quote unquote, as being fast. That was one of the very first things I remember just when you got into the sport. I remember, it don't even just coach. I remember lining up at this very first triathlon I ever did, which was in Kiowa Island. It was an Olympic distance race. And I think I've told a story one time. And I was on my way back I was moving back from Hilton Head Island to Nashville to be back with my family. My parents were getting divorced. And I went to this race, and I remember standing on the beach and looking at these people, and they were shredded. I mean, I felt like a lump on a log. And to be fair, I was also fairly new to being, a triathlete at that time. This was back in 2003 or 2004. And I had also gone through, fairly recently, my own kind of weight loss journey. When I was drinking really, really heavily, and eating just like terrible, I got up to about 225 pounds. Right now I'm less than that, and at this point at this race I was like 175, 180. So I'd gone through my own kind of weight loss and doing things and trying to change the way that I was living at that time. And so I was probably a little bit, as anybody who's, I think, ever gained weight and then lost it, I think you always kind of still see yourself in a specific way. Like, I think what you see in the mirror is usually a lie or usually distorted. And I imagine that's probably also the case for people who struggle with putting on weight, is that our mind and our brain and what we want and what we've been always plays tricks on who we are. And I think even honestly till this day, that if I look in the mirror and I kind of judge myself on how I look, or how my body type is, I still have, there was one point where I had like a legit six pack, but I still had stretch marks from where I had put on so much weight. And so I think that, so again, going back to triathlon, when you line up on this beach and you've got all these people and basically naked, with like minimal clothing on. If you saw somebody walking in the street with bra and panties or underwear, you'd be like, oh my gosh, please arrest them. And so I remember standing on this beach and thinking, I'm going to get annihilated. These people are thin, quote unquote, so they must be in good shape. They've got muscles, they're ripped, and like here I am, like I don't feel very comfortable with what I'm in right now, but let's get going. I remember coming out of the water, there was a huge swells that day, and I was in great swim shape at that time. I remember coming out of the water, and there was no one around. And I thought, my first thought to myself was, oh my gosh, I'm last. Oh my! Seriously, I was like, I'm last. All these people were cheering for me, and I was like, oh, yep, here we go. Like the prototypical last person out, and I'm getting like the big cheers, for, oh, he made it. He's like, he made it. It's so great. I'm thinking like, oh, all these people that are in, so look so much better than I do, physically from the outside and the exterior, have just like wiped the floor with me. And I ran up to transition, and I went over like the sand dunes. It was an ocean swim, and there stood my bike along with every other bike that was there. And I actually ended up first out of the water.
That's mic drop.
It wasn't really mic drop. And that's not to say how fast I was. It was just saying like that what we see and what we presume to be true regarding people's body composition. I think I still do it to this day. You look at people and you think they're better because they are thinner. And I think that's a message that we really have to change as a society and as endurance athletes, because what I've learned, especially as I've coached more longer distance racing athletes and athletes that have gone through eating disorders or body image, type feelings, is that strong is what you want. Strength is what you should go for. And I found even in the beginning of coaching, you would find athletes who were more concerned with looking like a runner, quote unquote, or a triathlete, and not fueling themselves properly or eating enough to make themselves strong enough to do these workouts. Because again, there are so few. Our relationship with food, I feel like, is fascinating because it is like the way that I think a lot of times we promote our internal feelings out in society by how little we eat, how much we eat, or how careful we are to eat. It kind of, if for a lot of people, I feel like it sums up our feelings about ourselves or what are going through. Like if you're depressed or if you're feeling, you're probably more likely to not eat great or not eat at all. Or if you're feeling really good and you're in a zone, you're probably going to be very careful about what you eat. So, I think in terms of our discussion today, I just really want it to be obviously open, but then basically also get across the point to where, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that weight doesn't matter because that's also a lie. Weight does matter, and I think it's how you look at yourself, and then also the things that it can affect your recovery. It can affect your racing. It can affect your fueling. It can affect the time it takes you to go in between events. It can also go to how you want to fuel for your event. So again, like there's a lot of ways we can go with this, but the main thing that I kind of wanted to get started with was that the thing that I should always encourage athletes to do is, and this is the conversation I have with some who ask me what to eat. I'm like, first of all, I'm not obviously a professional, but everyone has a different thing that's going to allow them. Like some people pick up triathlon because that's their thing, right? That's what they're willing to work for. Like, I see you doing Spartan races. That's not for me. Or I see you doing these, other types of events. That's not for me. But triathlon, that engages me. That's something I think I can see myself doing. And it's not that they can't do or get passionate about the other things, just that they feel more driven and have more energy to do this, which is triathlon. I think it's also the thing we see with diets, and for whatever reason, our society's like driven energy now to shame people for whatever they choose to do with their body, where it's have no meat, or whether it's have all meat, or whether it's just have your standard, I don't know, like regular Joe diet where you just try to eat healthy, and limit sugars and sweets. But I think strength is the most underrated aspect of endurance sports when it comes to training, in that if you aren't fueling for strength and you're more obsessed with just how much you weigh, and again, understanding that that's like, and I'm not going to say this for the whole podcast because I feel like I've got my point across, is that, but how sensitive it is. Somebody, will probably get their feelings hurt for this podcast, but it's okay. Is that like you have to, in order to perform well, you have to be able to fuel properly. And whatever that looks like for you, in my opinion, you should focus on strength first and your version of appropriate race weight second, because I feel like it can lend itself to being a very unhealthy balance where you equate a specific weight to a specific race readiness, or even worse, a self-worth.
Mm. Yeah, man, there's I think a tendency to, cause I went through that too. My first triathlon, I came out, like I'd never wore Lycra or anything before like that. And I had just got my new kit. I wasn't even, sure how to put it on or whatever. And I went and brought it with me down there, and I kind of put it on in like a porta john. I came out. When I walked out, I just felt like the biggest weirdo in history. And I was definitely overweight as compared to what I am now, and just all that stuff was going through my mind. But like on your point, the more I've learned about, especially long distance racing, it is so much. It's so much strength, and I think we have a tendency, obviously, to think that, we're just going to be faster if we're lighter. And then there's that fine line of being strong and light or whatever. But the reality of it is like for most triathletes anyway, I think, is that strength is everything, because like we're not even going that fast. First of all, like at least I speak for me, right? All right. But I've done all right in some Ironman races and things like that, but it's not like I'm flying. If I don't have the strength I need, and I think about that all the way through too. It's like I don't make sacrifices to deal with like weight loss a lot. It just sort of happens. Maybe I'm fortunate in that regard. But I know that if I don't have energy, man, then it's not worth it. But I sort of like I think really I'm honestly I don't want to say a depressed eater, but I definitely have binging tendencies, man. And like with sugar or something like that, and that's what I find almost the biggest struggle for me, especially during peak Ironman training or something like that, is when I will have a great day and I'll work out, a big workout, whether it's a 4 or 5 hour ride or something like that, and I'll feel great, and then I'll just eat a lot after that, and then like the next day or the next couple of days, and that's all on me too, probably as far as prepping up and fueling the day before. Who knows? I mean, this is just sort of a mystery. A lot of times is that I will go shopping and I'll just buy like cookies, man, and eat them, like all of them, and the next thing you know, I'm just sluggish and get depressed and things like that. But so I do think it's an important topic. And I think about it in terms of hydration too. I think most triathletes are probably chronically dehydrated, just because of the nature of what we go through, especially when it's hot out and stuff like that. And I'm a big believer that hydration is a huge part of diet and controlling your intake of food and things like that. So that's how I think about it. And as you're going, I guess, through these training cycles and dealing with, like I'll look in the mirror too sometimes and be like, damn, I look good, but I feel like ass or whatever, because like it's like after those rides, you're just naturally down in water weight and everything's kind of looking better. And then the next day I wake up, I feel good. And then I'll just be like, man, I got a tank going there or something like that.
I got a tank going.
Yeah.
It's, no, that's, again, like, I think that's one of the things that I think oftentimes endurance athletes, regardless of what their body image, thoughts are or feelings are, is that, you need to think, am I fueling and eating for performance, or am I fueling and eating for physical appearance?
Yeah.
And those
like the next movie you're doing.
Exactly. Like, and because they've even like said, like, that's stuff like that's very unhealthy. Like, I remember reading what Tom Hanks in Castaway. Like, he had one of the more, famous, body composition changes. He was basically like emaciated right through that film. And they talked about how I think he was talking about how, like, those drastic body changes that some of these actors have to do are so terrible for you long term. Like, it wrecks your body. But I think for endurance athletes, one of the things that I think kind of skews it again is that balance between, well, lighter is good because I want to be, especially cyclists. Like, I work with an athlete who comes from a primarily cycling background, she's female, and one of the reasons why this athlete left was because how obsessive she was becoming within the group dynamics of the team she was racing with about weight. It's all about watts per kilogram. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, aren't familiar with power, it's like, but the thing is, this is true for all things in sports. In a lot of ways, it's velocity. It's how much weight are you carrying for how much power you can produce. And obviously the easiest way to do that is the more power you can produce, the less amount of you is the faster you're going to go forward, with the amount of effort and efficiency. And so that was like the obsession. You see that when you watch the Tour de France, like, oh, that's not, right now he's pushing, 8 watts per kilo, which is crazy. They have these certain markers that you'll say for if you want to qualify for Kona or you want to do this, like, you need to be at 4.5 watts per kilogram. And so, like, it becomes an obsessive thing when you think. But the thing you also have to understand is, and this again goes to when you start to compare yourself to other people, is you can see somebody that's pushing, if you're in like one of those CompuTrainer classes or an indoor cycling class, and you see, let's say you're next to, Joe Tom, and he's pushing 380 watts up this hill. And you're like, gosh, like, why can't I push that? And then you look over and Joe Tom weighs 80 pounds more than you, but you're pushing 260. There's a great chance, depending on how less you weigh, that you'll actually get to the top faster of whatever, mythological, magical here you're on inside. Because it's about watts per. So again, it becomes a performance obsession, and again, that you'll also see that with a lot of long distance runners, and that's obviously another reason why a lot of them will come and say, like, that's the reason that they have gotten hurt before in the past with stress fractures, is lack of nutrients, lack of fueling, because they've been obsessed with weight. What do they weigh? Because long distance running, you don't ever see one. You're like, God, that guy's jacked. You might look at the guy in the 200 or 400 and think, like Usain Bolt, Michael Johnson, whoever, like they're ripped. Like their muscles are like, they look like a ripped machine. They're straight muscle. And then you look at somebody who does like the marathon, like you're like, gosh, like they might not have like an ounce of body fat on their body. And so that's why it's so prevalent in our sport, is that obsession with it. But it's also, I think, also because you equate when you see these professionals and how skinny they are and how thin they are. But the thing that some also, going back to like what you're saying about training and when what demands you have, like on long rides, you might think, God, I'm ripped. And then like two or 3 days later, you maybe take an off day and do an easy run and you went out to eat and you're like 4 pounds lighter. But are you really 4 pounds lighter? Like, what are you concerned about? Are you concerned about water weight and how I look when I'm, like you see the guys that, speaking of McGregor, hop on the stage at these UFC weigh-ins and they've done like the most unhealthy, like weight cuts imaginable, like dropping 20 pounds in like 24 hours. And they stand on stage and they are ripped. And then you can read about it. Like the next day for fight night, they weigh like 25 pounds more than what they did in their quote unquote weight class, to get ready for these fights. So you think about, all right, is it water weight that I just lose? Am I on the right track because I just lost water weight, or am I on the wrong track because I just gained quote unquote water weight? And something you need to take into context. But in terms of like,
on that point, quick, that there's a lot of people think that that's the reason, or one of the main reasons for like really bad concussion and head injuries and things like that, is that they drop all that weight and they can't get that water back into the brain and fast enough when they try to, they cut all that water out the day or two before, and the next thing you know, their brain doesn't have like legit fluids flowing through there, and people get knocked out and die and all kinds of crappy things. But that's what I think about it too, is like you get so run down in that regard. It's like your health is your mental health, so sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all good. It's a great point. But the thing, and we've talked about this before, I think maybe it was last year, maybe the year before, about when athletes, I think one of the more interesting things that athletes come to is like, I feel like athletes pick out their race weight like they pick out their race goal in tri-calc. They're like, you know what? My ideal race weight is definitely 170. And you're like, really? Like, where do you get that from? They're like, well, that's like down to like this. It's down to that. It's always about losing weight. If you notice, it's always about losing. Like, oh, well, I kind of think I feel best. Let me just pull this number. It's always, like a 170 or 170. It's not like, yeah, I think it's like 173.2. It's always like a very even number. Just like, yeah, I'm really going for like, sub 13. So my goal for the race is actually 12:59.59. And you're like, come on, like none of this is realistic. You don't even know what is going to be best. And so they'll pick this and then they wait to try to get to that weight until they're like 3 weeks out or 4 weeks out, and they're in their big build. And going back to what you're saying about coming back for these long rides, is that if you're focusing on weight, because again, like I'm not here to tell you that weight is important, because it is. Like it's important at the highest level. It's important at every level. I mean, in terms of running, it's important because of, if you asked a person to run easy for an hour that was at this weight versus a person running an hour at a weight that was 80 pounds more, the pounding on their body is going to be significantly more. Therefore, it's going to take longer recovery. So you can take two people with different weights or a huge range, ask them to run the same, kind of the same quote unquote pace or effort, and the stress on their body is going to be different because of the weight you have, and that's also going to be on recovery. And so again, going back to also how thin an athlete is, if they're really, really thin, they also can't take that much of penning because they don't have a lot of strength, they don't have a lot of ability to have a lot of muscular endurance. But when it comes to what people consider, I think, periodizing nutrition, because a lot of people obsess about periodizing their training, is that, this time of year, if I'm talking about me, and that's what I'll do, I'll talk about me, is I don't want to wait till the 8 weeks before a big event to get to my race weight. And the reason being is because if you've ever done 70.3 marathon training, Ironman training, the number one thing you always remember about that training is this: you're starving all the time. Like, you have like an insatiable appetite and all you want to do is eat. So, and rightfully so, because your training is probably at a level that's never been before. it's usually, depending on the time of year, but most times it's during a hotter part of the year. It's like July, August, September, like some of those brutal times a year, and that's when your highest volume is. So highest stress, highest need for recovery, highest need for nutrients, highest need for fluid. You don't want to be cutting calories then either, because all the the volume you're doing, all the extra intensity you're doing is going to be negated or even worse. And you see this with so many people. Like the reason you feel sluggish and tired is oftentimes not because you're training too much, it's because you're not fueling well. And again, like we talk about, and so like if you're, we'll go into that topic next. But so when you're going through and you're looking, all right, well, I need to be at race weight, then it's like you don't need to try and crash before that, but you need to, in my opinion, you would, if you even know, right? If you even like logistically know your perfect race weight, which I think most people don't, but you have an idea, whatever, you want to be there 8 to 12 weeks out. Because then your goal during the peak time, during your biggest build, is going to be just to maintain it, or even put on a pound or two. Because we all know, and we're all scared to do it, is if you come into a big Ironman event or 70.3 or marathon, whatever it is, and you're like lean and mean, and then the last week you taper hard, and you're starving. The last thing you want to do is get on the scale, because you know what you're doing? You're probably putting on some pounds. But that's okay. You're fueling up, you're stockpiling your big gas tanker for this one big day. But again, people will cut calories again, and they'll hop on the scale every single day because they will equate putting on pounds to slower performance, when what they're really doing is they're preventing their body from stockpiling the fluid and the nutrients they need on race day. I can tell you right now, the last thing I've ever wanted to do in my entire life is wake up on race day in the morning and hop on the scale. Because I guarantee you, having eaten all the pretzels in the world that I've eaten and drinking all the fluid the past 3 or 4 days and barely worked out, I probably weigh 6 pounds more than I probably did like the week before, if not more than that. But guess what? That doesn't mean I'm about to perform bad. That means I'm stocked and I'm fueled and my body is like bursting at the rim with nutrients and sodium and fluid and electrolytes, carbohydrates, everything it needs to perform well. I've got it all. What it doesn't need is a bare pantry. And the bare pantry might look lean and it might look mean as you make your way up to the swim start, but I promise you, like, you want to be strong, durable, and full when you hit that half marathon, whatever it is at the end of the race. So if you're thinking about like looking over the course of a year and you're training, and also for me, like this time of year, and I think it's kind of contrary to what most people think, or I think a lot of people, is that this time of year to me is like the easiest time to lose weight. Because you can go outside and you can run or you can ride, like, and your intensity is usually lower. The runs outside aren't as demanding. Like you can go outside and run right now for an hour and a half and probably, realistically just need water or noon. You go out in June for an hour and a half and you're probably gonna need like 2 or 3 bottles. With like some extra calories because you're fueling for the time. So that's why I think, again, if you're looking at periodizing your nutrition or your fueling compared to how you want to maybe lose weight, address it and look into it now in a healthy way and a way that's going to be sustainable to set yourself up for being able to do that exact same thing when it comes closer time to race day, when you don't want to be. You want to be shoving as many calories and fuel in your body as you feel like you need to perform the best you can on race day, in whatever form that is: proteins, carbs, fat.
Yeah, man, I first of all, I echo that. Stepping on the scale, I think the only race that I've ever done really that weighs you the day before is Wisconsin. And they always have a scale in there for some. Well, I guess it's because they want to know what you weigh when you pass out on the run the next day, and how much you've lost.
Mm-hmm.
But I always try to But yeah, I mean, I'm like 10 pounds over what I thought I was, a week and a half earlier or whatever like that. But let me ask you this, man. When you were back, like you were talking about your first triathlon, you said you had in your mind, a pretty legit weight issue going on. It's like. I'm a big believer in that, like stuff like big change and things like that have to happen kind of slowly, because I think your DNA is just used to certain things. And I think a lot of times when people get into triathlon, for example, it's sort of, I think a lot of times it's health related and it's weight related and it's life changing. At least a lot of the stories that I have seen. Some people, I guess, sort of grow up in that endurance world and they just do it. But for me, I know that when I started, my change was like too dramatic for the shape I was in. And it was like a rush job of sorts. I think about this in terms of like, I grew up mountain biking, for example. So whenever I get on a bike now, no matter how out of shape I am, I always feel like I'm a little bit further ahead than I thought I would be. And I'm sure that happens with runners that have been lifetime runners. They just pick it up. And I think there's something about the body that just is able to adapt to that. So like my thought process here is that, we get in, we try to change our life, we try to change our diet and all this stuff and eliminate it. And I think our body's like, wait a minute, it's sort of the slow change approach that I think is probably the best, because I don't know about you, but man, I am certainly, when I go, even still in triathlon training, it's such a dicey, slippery slope for me sometimes, because I do overexert, or like I'm not used to these kind of things, and my body still, I think, questions me. So I'm just very aware of, and I think that's a lot of times why I err on the side of pulling back, instead of going over the cliff on certain workouts when it's not necessary. And like you're saying about race weight, if, my race weight is what it is, I don't really target anything. And I just try to find my little sweet spot, a couple weeks out or whatever, and then I'm in a taper and I'm not working out as much, so I just live with whatever. I'm not stressing over it. But I think your body, I guess, needs to, it takes time, I guess is all I'm saying, is that a lot of times I think we start that like quick ascent into trying to be a better person. And like I was going to say, back when you went into treatment, for example, at that point, for you to just like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start triathlon, and I'm going to do whatever else, I think that's a shocking move, right? Am I making any sense with any of this?
What do you mean, like a shocking move?
Like you had to focus on, getting you wanted to get your head straight and all that sort of stuff. But if you added, like, let's say somebody didn't go into treatment, for example, they just wanted to change their life, and they just went all of a sudden, balls in on triathlon and not drinking and giving up sweets and blah, 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 all the way down the road.
Failure.
Yeah.
Total. Like, and that was one of the biggest things. Like, and I remember this, that, like because again, like anytime you try to do too many things at once, like you're asking for a cascade effect of usually like negative consequence, because it's only so much energy you have. And I remember that's why I was kind of, this isn't to poo-poo like passages of Malibu and like the places you see online, because I'm sure they can work out for certain people. But I remember like when I walked into the ranch to get treatment, like I remember thinking that, all right, man, it's probably not gonna be that bad. Like it might be a little bit of passages. Like I can probably got a fitness center, probably do a little thing. So I drive up to the middle of just godforsaken nowhere. And I mean like straight nowhere. I remember thinking, I was joking with this at Christmas with my sister this last Christmas, and I remember thinking, even if I wanted to leave, I would have died in the woods in the middle of some like 1,000 acreage farm of some place that I never knew existed, because it was out in the middle of nowhere. So I was stuck. Okay, I was stuck.
That Prisoner at Barclay.
It was like, dude, it was just straight there, and. So, but anyway, so I remember that's probably so I went into the intake, and then I went and I got assigned this house, and you're put in a house with people who are like, where they have the same disease you have, like the same things you're going over. And anyway, and I remember thinking like, oh my God, I have nothing. Like you get no phone time, you get no internet, you get no TV, you get no nothing. You have nothing. You have nothing. Yeah, there's a landline you can share, and you can't even have that until 2 weeks. I mean, I talked to you in that landline, a lot when I finally got, but it was like for 5-10 minutes at a time. But I remember thinking the first week or two I was there, I like hand wrote these like workouts I was going to do. I was like, man, I'm going to use this time to get like, I'm going to do me. I'm going to totally do me. I'm going to like lose some weight. I didn't even lose weight. I needed to put on weight because I was like emaciated at that point. Like if you see pictures of me, like, what I looked like back then, I was like 20 pounds lighter than what I was right now. And I thought I looked good, but I just looked like I was dying. And I was like, I'm gonna get even leaner and meaner. I'm gonna get like in all the shape. I'm gonna run around the yard, like this like fenced in like 1 acre lot we had. I'm like gonna do some laps, and I'm gonna do some sit ups, and I'm like Rocky. I'm gonna come out ripped. And man, that lasted for like 3 days, and I was so exhausted each day from having to like mentally and emotionally and physically and spiritually invest in what I was really trying to accomplish, which was myself, which was to get sober, to work through all the things that were leading to my drinking and trauma and all these kind of things that were super hard day in and day out with therapy and group sessions. I mean, I just dove in hard. I didn't work out again for like the next 86 days. I didn't, and I didn't have it in me. Like I had nothing. Like when I chose to like do anything that was an activity, I would go fish, or walk down by the river or whatever it was. But I had nothing. I had nothing else to give. And I believe that if you have like, there's only so many things in life you can focus on. The rest, oftentimes, you can think you're focusing, but all they are is really just distracting you from what you should be dialing in. And I think sometimes that's one of our biggest faults as humans is that we take on so many things that they end up being just distractions from the real focus of what our life should be focused on. And if you're trying to focus on, again, like on performance or getting better, running longer, like something has to give. You're a human. You're only capable of a specific amount of concentration and focus and resilience in certain areas until your chip is going to capsize. And again, like what you were saying, I think it was perfect in that I want to get faster. And like you see this time, you're all talking about going back to the watts per kilogram thing. I want my bike power to go up and I want my weight to go down. And you're like, oh my God, like it's not impossible. But it all comes down to like how like understanding what means what. So you could keep the same power and lose weight. And like I work with an athlete now whose cycling has stayed the same, but he's lost 25 pounds. So you tell me, has he gotten faster? Yes, on the bike. If you're going by watts per kilogram, yes, he's gotten faster and more short because he's lost weight, but his power stayed the same. Even if it had gone down like 5 or 10 watts, it's still better, right? And so again, like if you're thinking about taking on all these challenges, and that's why I'm not against New Year's resolutions, but I'm against making like 19 because, dude, it takes a lot to make one lifestyle change, just one, versus anything else. And I think most people would tell you this, and I can tell you this specifically as a great example coming from doing this like dopey challenge in Disney. Losing weight is 80 to 85, if not 90%, what you choose to eat and when you choose to eat it. It is 10% training. Because you can, I think Allie and I totaled up, we ran/walked just under 100 miles in 6 days while we were at Disney, including like the 50 miles we ran in the Dopey Challenge, and then walking around to and from the start, walking around the parks, 100 miles in those 6 days.
Yeah.
I gained 4 pounds.
Yeah.
Because of course, it's Disney. You're like eating all you want to, and like you're stuck with sodium. But like, it's about what you eat. And so again, like focusing on. But if I had have like tried to like cut weight while I was there and do those things, I would have failed miserably, right? Because to do like an event like that's endurance based, that's multiple days, and you need to recover. You have to eat to recover. You have to eat to fuel. You have to take care of yourself. So whatever method that is for you, whether it's whole foods only, whether it's, carbohydrates, whether it's plant-based, whether it's vegan, whether it's, keto, whether it's low carb, high fat, whatever it is, like you have to, for most people, you have to make small incremental changes that stick, not try to stick with 19 that all eventually fall away after 3 months.
Mm. Yeah. And that's the thing, exactly what I'm saying. You said it very well. And because you get into triathlon and you're trying to swim suddenly, maybe you're not even a swimmer, throughout your life, and you're trying to run and bike and do all these things, and that there's a lot of stress on that in general. And then all of a sudden you're trying to perfect it, and you know how it feels like if you swim 3,000 meters and you just feel like famished. So you got all these things going on, and that's why I'm like, it's got to be a gradual shift. Even, we talk about like, yeah, you can go out and run in this weather and really just run on water, but even I stay like, people that kind of don't use any fueling for running, especially when it gets hotter, I just think it's silly, because unless you're, a really accomplished runner that's used to it and your body's used to it and that sort of thing, but like, how much are you going to cut out? How much can you actually change in your life and retain sort of a semblance of sanity and health and just a good mood, because like it's it's so easy to fall in that trap. So even if it's just like 100 calories of some kind of, sports drink or something, just bring it along. It helps. It helps me not fall into the trash can, basically, is what I'm saying. I mean, it's these little things, and like you're saying, it really is about weight loss. I just think it's all so slippery because you're saying, weight loss is about what you put in your body. And I think that's probably a pretty good universal truth. And certainly working out and things like that and building muscle, because that's the other like mystery, right? When you're building muscle, it weighs more and all that business. And so to pay so much attention to the actual number versus how it feels and if it feels right, I think that can be it can be a challenging road.
I think, but I think what you just said is why it's so hard,
Yeah.
because people are afraid to go with their gut. I mean, that's like literally. It could be the title of our podcast. Go with your gut. Is based on body weight and nutrition stuff. But that I think that again, like we have this for whatever reason. We have this like societal need to like belong within a category, and belong within like, I'm this religious, a sect, I am this political affiliation, I do this diet, I am an Ironman, I am part of this community, whatever it is, like we have to do that. And I think that I've been reading a lot on like diet and weight loss because, like, to be honest with myself, like I find myself like fluctuating a lot, and I want to be. I'm not concerned with like performance. I'm concerned with like being the best that I can be, and that goes with just health. Like I just want to be healthy and feel good. And with Disney coming up, that I was like, man, I need to get my, for lack of a better term, I need to get my shit together, because I just want to be healthy. And then if I've looked back, like, you and I went, light vegetarian for like a month. So like went back to how I felt during that period. I went back to how I felt during other periods of the last like 6 or 7 years where I've worked through like different kind of eating and like what worked best for me. Because I do believe that certain things work better for certain people. That's why like physiology is so insane. Because every single person is different. Every single person is wired different. Every person is made up of different things. Certain people crave different things. Like, and going into what you're saying about what feels good is that like you need to go with what you feel works, and like that's why what they would consider like intuitive eating or intuitive dieting is like becoming fairly popular, because we live in a world where we have to kind of go all in on one thing, right? That's what you think it is. Oh, I'm keto, I'm plant-based, I'm vegan, and and the rest of you're all going to hell because you're not one of those. And basically, it's just what it says is like intuitive eating is a philosophy of eating that makes you the expert of your body and its own hunger signals. It's basically the opposite of like what you consider like your traditional diets. It doesn't impose guidelines. You don't have to abstain from this or have this. It's like, what do I feel like I need right now? Which is also why it's probably the least used diet on the planet, because, or quote unquote diets, because people don't trust themselves. People don't understand or think that like they don't know how to, or they're afraid to listen to their body. They would rather have an outlined meal for them that tells them what to eat all the time, even if for some reason they don't think that it's the best or it feels great at the time. They'll do it anyway because at least it's telling me what I should do. I don't want to have to think through that, because then what if I make the wrong decision? I'd rather be affiliated with a diet than I would be looking at to a deeper core, like, is this really best for Robbie? Or is this really best for Mike? And I think it's something that we should all look into. Is again, like we've always been on this podcast, a fan of listening to your body, and like knowing your body and knowing what you feel like it needs and just listening to it. And I think it'd be interesting to go by like, only like not having like set meal plans, like, and not like I affiliate with this diet or this approach, but just like I just kind of eat what I want to eat when I want to eat it, when I feel like that's what my body needs. Obviously that'd be different like post run or pre-run, or a day where you don't work out. That should be different. Like you don't need to be loading up at Chipotle for, the day you have an off day. It's like that'd be like best for the night before a run or right after a run. Like those are the things I think are interesting in that, getting to know your body, because again, you are the only person that can really truly understand your body. and what it feels and what it needs, and then also what it craves, and then how to counteract that.
Yeah, man, it's so interesting. I think a lot of times I get into these when I know I'm in trouble is when I get that crazy deep craving for, like I need to eat some pasta or something like that. And I don't just have like a plate of pasta. I have like the whole box, I'll just pour it on. And I'll know that's a sign. And I don't know the answers to these things yet. It is difficult. We don't have that LeBron James $1 million budget to try and figure out our, and I suppose there's something to that, but here's a guy, or like an NBA players, they're young and they're every night they're running up and down the court. They're super athletic, and that probably masks a lot of stuff, right? Like I feel like triathlon does that too. I can get away with eating a package of cookies or something like that a little bit more than maybe the average person, just because I'm going to go burn it. But I think about that like with the you see NBA athletes after their career or whatever, pro, and they kind of start losing it, So it's like I don't necessarily know what the perfect solution is, but it probably has something to do with general moderation and not eating a ton of sugar, or any sugar for that matter, and maybe drinking water before you eat. Those are. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly, man. I've gone down those roads like you're saying we did the, half-baked vegan experiment, and I just didn't do it right. I mean, they're like, I'm not saying it's not great. I don't know. I think a lot of times, vegetables, for example, are powerful. They have a lot of enzymes, and they're a powerful reaction in the body. If you're not used to it, sometimes that can cause problems. And it's like these long-term, is this good today? It feels good today. But then, like the next day, you ever go through that one where you're like, man, this new diet feels amazing. Mm-hmm. And then 3 days later, you're like, no, this is not working, whatever it is. I mean, it could be a lot of protein. It could be a lot of vegetables, whatever it is. You kind of, that first day or two, it kind of works. And then it just goes haywire. So then you kind of revert back, and it's like, I don't know. It's tricky.
It's that, well, yeah, man. That's like the theme of all of our podcasts. It's hard and it's tricky. But like it's, and again, like I think it's one of those things where it's so hard because, or the reason that we see so many diets and trends and things like that is because it is hard. Because like we would rather not do the work to think through it ourselves. We would just rather attach to a specific form of what we know is best, or we think we know is best, because even if it's like 60 to 70%, and this is also true, like it could be 60 to 70% of the way towards what really is best for you, and that is better than being 0% of the way. Like I totally understand and appreciate that aspect of some of these directions people go, is because at least they're on a direction. They're not just like flailing or treading water or drowning in the nutritional food pool. They at least have a way to go. And if losing weight for some people is a good thing, but truly figure out like what makes you tick and what makes you what is considered being fueled the best for you is different than anybody else. So every time you read something or somebody's journey or whatever, it's like it's all specific to them. There are obviously like specific guidelines that are true, for most people and like what should be healthy, but everyone is different. And the hard work is figuring out exactly what's best for you and why it's best for you, and trying that out and being okay with it. But that's why it's hard, because you have to track things. How are you feeling? How is your mood? How is your hunger? What's your cholesterol like? What's your blood work say? Like all these things are hard. Like it takes time to look through those things, and most people don't want to take that time, or they feel like they don't have the time. They would just rather not think and just remove certain things, or feel like they have to abstain to be this. And it's a complicated. Is that your rotary dial phone going off in the background? But it's maybe that's the food police calling. But it's a hard thing to go through. I think that it's again, it's a topic that's discussed ad nauseum on every social media platform, as everyone likes to shoot off their own personal propaganda of why you shouldn't or shouldn't be something, but it's all specific to you. And, whatever you're doing, or if you're trying to make changes or you're stuck, like always think of yourself first and remember that, what you weigh is not a definition of who you are, and you should always treat yourself kindly. You should always look to the long term of what's really going to be best for my body and best for me, and what helps my mood and my emotions, what makes me feel good. And, if you find yourself in a in a pattern that's degrading to yourself, or you're negative about yourself, or you're hungry all the time, again, like that's like the big thing. You shouldn't be hungry all the time. Your body is telling you it needs things, and you're depriving it. You're stealing something from it. It's like, treat your body and yourself with respect, and treat it well, and be kind to it. And if you struggle in that way or in those ways, and then seek help, of a professional, that can help you with that way, or that's gone through the same things you've gone through, as body image or bulimia or anorexia or being obese and you can't cut the weight. Like, if that's something you want to do, reach out to a professional that is willing to have like a relationship with you and look through things with you and do it the healthy and the right way. But most importantly, just do it for yourself. Don't do it because you feel like you have to. And do it because you want to be healthy, or you want to turn things around, or you want to deal with it. Like, those are the things that are going to make things different in how you approach it versus how a lot of people approach, quote unquote dieting, which is a punishment. And food is not a punishment. Food is necessary to your body to fuel it and to live and to perform and to do things you want to do. It's the relationship with food and how we see ourselves, and those two relationships are what are the most combative things that cause the main issues. Is your relationship with food, the good and the bad, and then your relationship with yourself and your weight and your body image. And that's why, again, it's such a dangerous combination, is because those are both two deeply, deeply rooted relationships from whatever it's been caused, that when you combat those, they become combative against each other, that you can see people really spiral. And that's the last thing that's the last thing you want to have to go through. And so that's my ending spiel for today.
That's a good one, man. And yeah, like I said, I just want to reiterate that it is difficult, and you're doing triathlon, and you're obviously care if you're still listening to this podcast and you want to be better in life and everything like that. And it is tricky, and we go through it too. And a lot of people go through it. And well, I don't ever claim to have the solutions. I can at least try to explore them, and I think that's what you're doing. So stay at it and tweak.
Go with your gut.
Yep, go with your gut.
Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. As always, if you haven't visited or you want to go back, feel free. You can visit us at C26Triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things that we do, training, coaching, and the like. Go there, check it out, peruse it. It also is really awesome. It does a really awesome job of highlighting our team and our community. That is one of the best. We'll catch you on Thursday. If you have any questions, reach out. Mike is available at crushingiron@gmail.com, and I'm available at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Always, man.
I'll talk to you later.